I am thrilled to be joined by two folks from Jewish Voice for Peace, including Liv Cunnins-Berkowitz and Jason Farben. Welcome to you both.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Liv, what do you do with Jewish Voice for Peace?
I am the media coordinator for Jewish Voice for Peace. So a lot of it has been how are we telling our story of the movement we're a part of and sharing our call for ceasefire with as many people as possible right now.
And Jason?
I'm the digital director, which means that I do the website and our team does the emails. So really a lot of the digital actions that we've been doing, including the petition to Biden to demand ceasefire, which now has well over 250,000 signatures. And then all the emails, we've just, been getting a ton of interest. So trying to figure out how to keep everybody in the loop and keep everybody plugged in.
So I'm sure most of the listeners don't need any introduction, but can you just walk us through some of your biggest actions, if you want to call them that, over the last 5 weeks, where people might know you from?
Well, we began this month by shutting down the Capitol, and we brought around 500 Jews to sit in the Capitol. We were led by rabbis who are part of our rabbinical council at Jewish Voice for Peace, and they led us in singing and praying and calling for a ceasefire because we immediately knew we had to get our voices into the halls of power. And yeah, we've just kept organizing from there all over the country. We've led sit-ins in Grand Central Station, took over the Statue of Liberty, shut down the Oakland Federal Building, occupied Hollywood Boulevard in LA, staged a huge protest outside of the Israeli consulate in Chicago, and then so many more actions that maybe haven't made national news, but are really transforming small communities all around the country.
I mean, honestly, it's been so impressive. It feels like if you were just to ask me based on the kind of media impression you've been able to make and the sheer volume of people that you've been able to call to various locations, seemingly with relatively little notice, that this is an enormous political organization that's been around for a very long time. That is perhaps one of the most organized organizations in the entire country. It's been really impressive. What is the truth about who JVP is, how long it's been around, how big the org is, and what kind of growth you've seen since October 7th?
Well, we've been around since the early 90s. A couple of students in, I think, Berkeley formed the organization out of the dorm room and have grown and grown and grown. I don't think that the idea at the beginning was the same idea as it is now, but I think gradually realized that there's a particular attention paid to Jews who are coming out to say Israel doesn't speak for all Jews. And so that really changed the organization. There's been a number of inflection points where we've changed and grown. I think on the left today, there's a tendency for organizations to either be, we want to be big, come in, and we'll accept everybody, we just want to be big, or we want to be politically pure, we have to agree on everything, so we'd rather stay tiny and pure. And the thing that's been notable about JVP and why I wanted to come work here is that it feels like JVP has gotten better and then has gotten bigger as a result of getting better. Has gotten actually moved left, but brought people with them. So first of all, to boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and then to combat police exchanges, to become formally anti-Zionist, to go from non-Zionist to anti-Zionist. And there was a way in which there was an idea that people are coming to this from very many different places. It's very hard to break with Israel for many, many Jews. And so they're coming and we want to take people where they're at and move them into a place where they can be leaders on this question. And I think right now that's what we've been seeing. I think most people watch when Israel drops bombs on Gaza, whether it was in 2014, 2021, any of these times, it feels extremely isolating because in the mainstream media, you're not hearing anything about this. You're hearing maybe the Israeli side and a real rah-rah to war. And it feels isolating and you feel alone. And you feel like there's nothing you can do. And to be honest, as an individual, there's really not anything you can do, right? And so I think the protest that Liv was talking about, to see hundreds of Jews occupying the Rotunda in DC, which was the largest protest in solidarity with Palestine of Jews ever, and then to see occupying Grand Central Station, then the Statue of Liberty is literally a Department of Homeland Security protected terrorist threat type level, and all of a sudden there's Jews all over it, hanging banners, owning it. And then there's places everywhere. There's opportunities to do everything. So I think we were the largest, before this happened, we were the largest Jewish Palestine solidarity organization in the world. So that gave us the ability to take a lot of these moves, to have people in different cities to move. But I think also the growth has been exponential since people have started to see that there's something they can do. There's some way to plug in. There's an avenue that they can actually try to affect change. And I think so. The organization has kept growing and growing, which then becomes a sort of like self-fulfilling cycle. We can do more. We can reach more people. More people want to join, and so on.
I'll just
I am
add, I
curious
think,
about that. Oh,
sorry,
go ahead, please.
I was just going to add, I think, our organization is really embedded in so many Jewish communities around the country. So I can just speak to the Oakland Federal Building shutdown because I was there last week. The people who were showing up are the people who normally do Shabbat together, normally go to synagogue together, celebrate the holidays together. So a lot of the relationships that are behind this organizing are relationships that are deep and strong and are really embedded in community. So there's a lot of, trust that existed before, this moment we're in, and we're leaning on our kind of deep bonds and commitments to each other to mobilize, to show up, to take care of each other as we face police. We've seen an increase in police violence against people in our movement. And so we have these really strong bonds that come from our community, and we're bringing that into the movement and into the work.
I mean, speaking of that, I mean, I am curious. We scheduled this before the protest event here in DC the other night that Fox News and even some liberal mainstream media pundits have been characterizing as a violent attack of pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas Jewish protesters on a government building, a mini J6 of sorts is how it's being framed, erupted just a couple of days ago. Of course, video evidence tells a very different story of police officers seemingly indiscriminately spraying pepper spray at peaceful protesters.
Oh shit! Someone just got thrown. People getting thrown down the stairs. People getting thrown down the stairs. Yo.
But I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment on that, which does really seem to be evidence of the escalation you just described.
I mean, I think it just reflects the degree to which people who are willing to speak out for Palestinian lives, for Palestinian dignity, are under attack right now. We're under insane repression that we haven't seen to this degree in years, and are facing, I mean, I think what can only be described as police brutality. There was police who were just throwing punches, and there's, I mean, just no world in which that's acceptable. And not to give any grounds to Marjorie Taylor Greene in this moment, but she also called what we did at the Capitol this insurrection, when the whole time we are singing, there are old people involved in our movement. Like, this is explicitly nonviolent. And I think to be painted as these insurrectionists or something like that just shows the degree to which our movement, which reflects the voice of the majority of the American people. Polls have showed that the majority of the American people are calling for a ceasefire, is so threatening to those in the halls of power because they're unwilling to listen to these voices, and we are bringing those voices right to their doorsteps.
I mean, it's shocking.
And it's not.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's shocking to the degree to which the mainstream media will still take police statements at face value. The police had not one shred of evidence that they claimed that 6 police officers were hurt and someone pepper sprayed a police officer in the face. I don't know who would do that and expect to live, but there's not a shred of evidence for this at all. But what there is there's a lot of video showing a Capitol police force hellbent on just rampaging over a candlelight vigil, which is crazy, and then calling it a Hamas protest, and people are willing to pick up on that. I mean, I think the value to the other side of calling it a Hamas protest is that when we focus on Hamas, it becomes a little hazy. It's it seems like a battle, a war that we maybe there's two sides, and it distracts from the fact that people are calling for ceasefire. They're saying we want to stop killing people. We want to stop dying. We want to return hostages. We want to stop killing. And there's, as we saw in the less well attended than advertised protest for Israel, people are very hungry to keep the ceasefire going. They want to keep bloodshed going. So I think it was the thinnest veneer of an excuse or of the truth, and I think people were happy to run with that who want to keep the bombing going.
Yeah, I'm frankly grateful that kind of a straight news guy like Dave Weigel was around to be pushing back against some of the narratives that were coming out of that event the other day. I mean, Brad Sherman, he's a Democratic representative. He went on Abby Phillips's show on CNN and immediately started characterizing the protest as violent and frankly lied blatantly on mainstream news.
Yesterday, there were over 200,000 pro-Israel demonstrators with a permit, entirely peaceful. And here you have a demonstration less than 1,000th as large that's also getting publicity. And it's getting publicity because their willingness to attack police, as they did with pepper spray, is a force multiplier. A few demonstrators willing to attack police getting a fair amount of publicity, whereas the amount of publicity for 200,000 peaceful demonstrators proportionately less.
And I just want to make a note here that we don't know exactly who was responsible for the pepper spray, but as we continue to report on this story, we'll learn more. Congressman Brad Sherman, I do thank you for joining us tonight.
I believe the Capitol Police.
All right.
Abby Phillips got into a little bit of trouble for not pushing back adequately, although she did reframe it before the segment ended to her marginal credit there. But it's been amazing seeing this take off when you got absolutely no coverage of, say, Medea Benjamin with Code Pink getting screamed at by people at the peaceful pro-Israel protest earlier this week, being told that they hope that she gets raped and all of those kinds of things.
I wish they will rape you alive. They will film you.
Go to Gaza. Why don't you get kidnapped by them in Gaza and see if people come and save you? Because we should have a ceasefire and negotiate with terrorists. They're just going to say, oh, you stop bombing us, we'll stop bombing you. Here, take them back. Yeah, they'll just say, here, take them back.
Israel controls whether they have water, whether they have electricity.
We generously give them water. We generously give them electricity.
It's their land, my dear.
They have access to it.
It's their land that was taken
It's
from
not their
them.
land. Jesus was a Jew. Do you know that? He was born there. The Jews were there first.
Oh, there were no
Read the Torah,
Palestinians there.
read the Old Testament, read the New Testament.
Of course, and I know that there's over 400 Palestinian villages that were destroyed in 1948. What's called the Nakba.
Who was here first?
Indigenous people.
Right. So should we all be kidnapped and tortured, our babies put in an oven because we took it from the Native Americans? No. But yet you're living here. I think we should torture you and your family. Let's cut open your stomach, take out your fetus and throw it in an oven and then smell it while they torture you and cut off your body parts and rape you, make you naked and drag you through the street.
I just wish your kids gonna be there.
Yeah, you are fucking so stupid.
I wish they will rape you alive. They will film you, and if your mother will be alive, they will send the video for your mother to see how you burn. That's what I wish, and this is if this is okay for you. So I don't know what you made from.
To wish that
it's
anybody
terrible.
be treated.
It's terrible that people had it.
I know.
People burned alive.
And it's
The
terrible.
mother watch it on TV, on the video, on the video.
You know what a bomb
They
does?
film it.
It burns people alive.
They didn't. Why don't you go to Gaza?
We've been exchanging for hostages.
Why don't you go to Gaza to live there? Why don't you go there?
It's like a concentration
Why don't you go there?
It's like
a
run by
Shame
by that.
in love.
Let's be very clear.
in my ass, your ass. You don't know nothing.
Peace and love. Let's all live
Let's
together.
be very clear.
And not to mention the presence of a known anti-Semite, this Hagee character who was invited to speak at the pro-Israel rally. And then there was a cringe moment of Van
Jones.
Van Jones. Sorry, I'm like Van Newkirk, all these Van Jones, getting saying something kind of anodyne about how I hope that we stop the bombing and I hope there's peace, and getting shouted down with a chant of no ceasefire, no ceasefire.
Yeah.
I do feel powerful is to maybe do something about what's happening here. Let's take a stand here against anti-Jewish bigotry. Let's take a stand against Muslims. Let's take a stand here against hatred. Let's take a stand here against hatred of all kinds. I don't want any Jewish mother.
It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable, but what did you expect? I mean, we knew going in, it had been reported that Hagee, for instance, was going to be speaking at the pro-Israel rally.
Israel may be shaken, but she is not shattered. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob guarantees Israel's deliverance will come, as proclaimed every year during Passover. It says, in every generation they rise against Israel to destroy it. And the Holy One, blessed be He, saves Israel from their hands. The Bible says, He that keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. To those who seek to justify the slaughter of Israelis by demonizing the Jewish state, Israel is not merely a state. When millions of Zionists mention Israel, they don't just mean the only freedom-loving democracy. Israel is this and more. Israel is the apple of God's eye. Israel is the shining city on the hill. Israel says, God says of Israel, Israel is my firstborn son. Jerusalem is the city of God. Jerusalem is the shoreline of eternity. Jerusalem is the eternal capital of Israel today and forever. There is only one nation whose flag will fly over the ancient walls of the sacred city of Jerusalem. That nation is Israel, now and forever. Israel's victory will come when Hamas and Hezbollah are in the ash heap of history along with Haman and Hitler. There is no substitute for victory.
I mean, what are the conversations like? I mean, you Liv said that people are coming with their community members, people they celebrate the holidays with, to these events. But it also must be the case that there's a wide, broad difference of opinion within families and communities about these two big respective camps and the very, very different kind of protest events that are going on around the country right now.
I would totally love to talk about that. I want to comment on Hagee quickly because I just feel like there hasn't been quite enough coverage of this. Yep. This is a man who John McCain had to reject his presidential endorsement in 2008 because he said that God has created Hitler to send the Jews back to Israel. I mean, this is like anti-Semitism in its highest form. And we had leading Democrats sharing the stage with him. You know, Chuck Schumer spoke in the same rally as him. The Republicans and Democrats put their hands around each other and said, you know, when it comes to Israel, there is no difference around us. And like this, it's appalling. They're giving power to this man who is peddling the most virulent forms of anti-Semitism. I just want to note he runs CUFI, which is Christians United for Zionism, which is a group that has more members than all of the Jews in America combined. So I also think we have to make it clear the degree to which Christian Zionism is also fueling America's support for Israel. And so in addition to really urging all Jews to speak up about this, I think this is important. This genocide is being waged in our names, and it's important we speak out. But I also want to make it clear, like, this is a thing for all Americans to be thinking about. All our tax dollars are funding what Israel's doing. And, you know, getting the vote of Christian Zionists is such an important thing for the GOP. And so they're explicitly looking to cater for this demographic. When Trump moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, he explicitly said he did it for the evangelicals. So I just kind of want to be like bringing in the power players in this because it really is to a large extent the Christian Zionists in America. And then we have the Democrats, rather than calling them out, you know, showing up to the same events. And it's just created this insane paradigm in the United States where, you know, the people who are supposed to be progressive, supposed to speak out for human rights and the dignity of all people are cozying up to really the most hateful among us. So that is just want to add that context into the rally because I don't feel like that's been sufficiently covered.
No, I'm really glad you did Liv, but that does tie into the other part of the question that you said you wanted to weigh in on, which is, you know, how those realities play within the American Jewish community. You know, it's an open secret that so much of the support for Israeli policies is being led by the right and these Christian Zionists who have their own scriptural reasons for wanting there to be a state of Israel that have nothing to do with the safety or well-being of Jewish people. So, that's a very uncomfortable bedfellows there. What are the conversations like within the community about not just that aspect of it, that there's this weird political allegiance that's happened between these, frankly, oftentimes openly anti-Semitic quarters of the country and AIPAC and pro-Israel advocacy, and the broader conversation that's happening right now around the Hamas attack on October 7th and the mixed emotions that I'm sure are percolating as a result?
I mean, I think it's a really hard time in the Jewish community, and I think it's a hard time for a lot of people, obviously, first and foremost, Palestinians, but I think there's tremendous tension, really intense disagreement within families, and a moment of deep reckoning with what we've been raised with. I mean, I think most Jewish Americans are raised to be taught that Zionism is essential to Judaism, and that if we didn't have the state of Israel as it exists today, Jews would be incredibly unsafe in this world. And that's heavy and that's serious. And it's not totally crazy why Jews believe it. I was raised on the stories of my great-grandparents being violently chased out of Russia, being shot and murdered. And it shapes who you are when you're raised on those stories. And, I think the case that we're making really clearly is that there's no version of safety that comes at the dispossession and destruction of another group of people, period. Like, that is not safety. That is not the world we want to live in. And so we're asking, the people in our community to unlearn this really narrow idea of safety that's based in militarization, that's based in just violent dispossession. But there's pain and there's fear and there's confusion. I think, unlearning decades of propaganda is really hard work, to be honest. I'm thinking of a friend of mine who grew up going to Jewish day school, and something he told me was that at his Jewish day school, it was totally okay to question whether or not there's God, but not okay whether or not to question if you support Israel. And, I'm for questioning everything. I think that's what Jewish tradition really asks us for. So, question God, question Israel, question all of it. But just the fact that that's where our Jewish institutions are at, where this like support for a state is so much more central than even the kind of religious basis of Judaism.
And I think the safety question is really important. The institutions like AIPAC, the ADL, Israel, their foundational pitch to us is that they're going to keep Jews safe. But what they're really doing all the time is making Jews feel unsafe. Always. It's like the post 9/11 state. You have to feel unsafe. You have to feel unsafe. That's why you need us, right? There's like all kinds of polling that show Jews are overwhelmingly progressive, democratic, in the United States, overwhelmingly so. And especially young people are very, ambivalent about Israel. They're saying that they sympathize more with Palestinians than with the state of Israel. And so you have all of these progressive Jews, but there's also, there can be a lot of support for a strong state of Israel. And like, it seems contradictory, but it's not, because why do people support a strong state of Israel? Well, Jews support a strong state of Israel when they fear for Jewish safety. When they think that like there's someone around the corner waiting to get you as a Jew, they're more likely to say, well, I don't agree with Israeli policy, but there needs to be a strong state. We need to have some place for us. And that's why like the ADL is simultaneously in the business of like defending against anti-Semitism while like ratcheting up concerns about anti-Semitism based on the barest shred of evidence or no evidence. And then simultaneously like calling any criticism of Israel anti-Semitic. I mean, when you look at what they actually do, they spend a lot more time defending Israel than defending Jews. They spend a lot of time talking about how Jews are unsafe, but not actually doing much to actually make that happen, other than going after student groups, going after cracking down on freedom of speech, making it illegal to criticize Israel. So it's very confusing, I think, for people right now, and it's confusing for people to try to figure that out in the middle of like a crisis. But I think what's been happening, where you have people protesting peacefully for a ceasefire to save all life, not making it a polarized situation, and you have other people saying, no, we don't want that. We want to keep the bombing going. Or like Biden is like, we want a humanitarian pause, right? I don't know what a pause on genocide is or what that solves, but I think for people it's becoming more and more polarized. And you see in the polling numbers, what is it, 60, 70, 80% of the American population wants a ceasefire now, and the people at the top are intransigent. They're not willing to give this up without a real fight.
Yeah, I think it's something like 68% of the population now, but closer to 80% of Democrats. So there's
That's
this
right.
interesting
Yep.
dynamic happening where Democrats, like old Brad, who was mentioning earlier on Abby Phillips' show, who are making this argument that the core of their donor base are all Hamas-loving psychos. All of the students are Hamas. All of the protesters are Hamas. Everyone who doesn't want to vote for Biden is Hamas. And I'm not really sure if that's the best voter turnout mechanism for a historically unpopular president heading into an election year. But never mind that. I mean, Jason, you brought up the ADL. I mean, the ADL and Jonathan Greenblatt have specifically included Jewish groups like yours among those characterized as anti-Semitic.
Yep.
Make it make sense.
Well, I mean, can I tell you a story about the ADL? I mean, there's lots of stories about the ADL, but can I tell you one? So the ADL, I mean, they present themselves as a storied civil rights organization. I think it's important for people watching this show to know the ADL has nothing to do with civil rights. They are not a legitimate civil rights organization. Doesn't matter if they say it. And one example of this is that the ADL is literally the largest non-governmental trainer of the US police, period. Like outside of the US government, outside of local governments, it's the ADL. Every police person that you know and hate, Ray Kelly, all of these people have been honored at one point by the ADL. A month after Ferguson, the head of the police response in Ferguson was honored by the ADL. It's unbelievable. And what they've been doing for years to cement the U.S.-Israeli relationship is to take police in the United States, take them to Israel, and say, like, this is how you beat and abuse a detained and captive population. So, like, let's trade stories and let's trade ideas, and then you can go back to, like, Raleigh or Seattle or wherever, and then you can use what you just learned on the population there, usually on Black people. And there's been a tremendous link between like Black and Palestinian, like there's been Black and Palestinian solidarity as a result of that, which has been very inspiring. But we had formed a Deadly Exchange campaign about 5 years ago to expose this and to try to end this. And we fought, and the ADL, especially in 2020, when the George Floyd protests were happening, it was Black Lives Matter 2.0, the largest protests in the history of the world were out. Everyone was out. The ADL was in a crisis. There was a memo that leaked a year or two later that said that junior people who were in charge of like maintaining this program were like, we have to stop this. We have to end this program immediately. It is so politically costly to be sending police right now to Israel. It's like that, whatever we're paying to send the police there, we're spending 4 times as much to cover, to do the PR, to try to cover our tracks. And so we have to end this. We have to end this. So they did end it. They ended it. And then when the memo leaked, it was covered in the news. It was very, I was very pleased that JVP was mentioned 5 times in that. 1 month later, Jonathan Greenblatt is giving a public address. There's many recorded instances of this. He's giving a public address saying that they're going to throw everything at their disposal. And they're a $93 million organization. They're going to throw everything at their disposal to fighting JVP, SJP, that's Students for Justice in Palestine, and CARE, which is the Council on Arabic Islamic Relations, which is sort of a non sequitur, but so I don't know how they picked that. But the point is they're going to use all their resources. He said the JVP and SJP are basically the equivalent of the Proud Boys, that like anti-Zionism is making Jews less safe. It's not even criticism of Israel. It's just like anti-Zionism in general is basically the same thing as far right-wing, like white supremacy. And so they had always been fucking with us before then, but this was like the like shots fired announcement of a full war. And so, it's like, it's not, it sucks. It's not surprising when they say things like that. It's not surprising when they come out and like within like hours of Columbia University suspending SJP and JVP, the ADL puts out a tweet being like, thank you, Columbia, for suspending these groups. Like, way to keep Jews safe. That's amazing. Like that seems like a strong strategy.
Honestly, it has been so inspiring. I say this specifically because I have often felt that because one of the main cudgels that have been used against the left, the Bernie movement, whatever you want to call it, since 2016, have been accusations that the movement doesn't include any Black people, it's just a bunch of Bernie bros, etc. I have often felt a particular obligation to be loud. In fact, I started freelancing. I started writing my first article largely pushing back against the way that identity was being weaponized against the left, particularly my own identity. And I can see how important it is to have visible non-white male members of the leftist movement to insulate against unfair criticism. Now, there are some fair criticisms that are out there. I'm not saying that there aren't, but the idea that this is not a movement that is germane to the interests of Black and brown and poor working people and women and all of those other kinds of things was obviously incorrect and very frustrating to me. And because I have been in that role, I am incredibly heartened and inspired by and grateful for the overwhelming presence of Jewish peace activists in the context of the fight for a ceasefire. So I really want to say that and really give so much credit, because what ends up happening is that it neuters so effectively the arguments that are being made by the ADL and others who would like to make this an issue about Jewish safety at the same time that we're seeing on video police officers push and shove and pepper spray crowds of largely or exclusively Jewish protesters to the ground, not just the other night, but also at the protest in front of the White House a week or so ago, and all over the place. Medea Benjamin is a Jewish woman who's standing there at the pro-Israel event, getting screamed at in those ways. So it really does feel core to the movement. I don't know what this would look like, how much easier it would be to smear a movement for a ceasefire, if it weren't for the leadership of Jewish advocacy groups. I did want to talk to you a little bit more, though, especially as we're heading into the holidays. I remember having a version of this conversation on a podcast that I had many, many years ago that was recording right after Donald Trump won. And everyone was talking that year about what kind of conversations people were going to have at the dinner table over Thanksgiving, because people's families obviously are very ideologically divided over what had just happened at the ballot box. And I am curious what it's been like for you guys outside of your kind of movement activity back when you retreat into your personal lives, especially given that there is such an age divide on how people come to the issue of Palestine, self-determination, ceasefire, all of it. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about Thanksgiving, Liv?
Totally. It's complicated. There is totally this age divide, and I don't want to minimize that. But I also think that, older Zionists are saying it's only the young, it's the crazy young radicals who have changed their mind, and there's no old people who feel this way. And it's just not true. In the Bay Area, I know we have a specifically radical older population given the Bay Area's history, but we had folks getting arrested with their walkers. I mean, it was truly incredible. There's been one of the first women rabbis in America was in the world in Jewish history was there with us getting arrested. She's been in the Palestinian Solidarity Movement for 56 years. And, as long as Zionism has existed as a political ideology, there's been Jews who oppose that. And I know that because on my mom's side, I come from a family that's always opposed Zionism. And so I just want to...
So you come from a woke family, Liv. You're one of the lucky ones that's not going to have a hard conversation across the turkey.
We have our own dynamics, but I just want to, as much as the young people are showing up and are coming through, and the Jewish communities are changing, there are old folks who know that this ain't it. So I just want to make that clear. But yeah, the families, it's hard, and it's, I do feel like as a Jewish person, it is my obligation to hold that empathy. I understand where they come from, and then just hopefully bring them along to this vision of justice that's rooted in everyone's humanity. And I am a person with faith, and I read Torah and I pray and the whole thing. And so this is my deeply faithful, peaceful side where I'm I have to believe that we can do Judaism beyond Zionism. I have to believe that people are capable of transformation. I've seen it with people in my own life. My dad, on the other hand, was raised deeply a Zionist, spent every year going to Israel growing up, lived in Israel, really believed that it was his favorite place. It can be not fun to be a Jew in America. There's a lot of Christianity that dominates our culture. And I think he felt really part of community there. And then slowly began to realize that this community was based on the oppression of the Palestinian people, and felt like Israelis were not deeply committed to to changing that reality. That was like a inconvenient truth that people weren't willing to confront or work on. And now my dad's an anti-Zionist. And so I have to believe in this transformation and do feel that as Jews, it's our responsibility to talk to our community, to say, like, we have to do better. And that the answer to our trauma, the answer to our oppression, the answer to the genocide of the Holocaust and the pogroms, like, cannot be colonial domination of another people. Like, it just can't be. And we have to do better. And it's hard. I mean, it's also been a brutal, like, I don't even know how time has flown in the last month, but it's heartbreaking that we're here. It's most heartbreaking because of the degree of Palestinian life lost, which is just more and more every day. And it's heartbreaking because I feel like we are, like, losing our soul. I mean, Judaism at its core is a tradition that really calls for the divinity of each person. We say B'Tselem Elohim, everyone was made in the image of the divine. That includes Palestinians. You know, saving a soul in Judaism is the most holy thing you can do, more so than any other commandment. And so I'm like, what have we done? Where have we gone? And so so family stuff has been sad, and these conversations have been sad, and there's no amount of inspiring justice work and solidarity and activism that can take away from, like, the horror and tragedy of this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually at I guess an interfaith wedding that was a half Jewish wedding on October 7th. And I remember we were there and people were trying just to not look at their phones. And it was this feeling of, well, it wasn't the scale of it was only emerging and becoming more clear over the course of the next few days. But it definitely was, even in that context, oh God, like, I hope just nobody brings this up. Let's just celebrate this wedding and try to have a nice time. And I can't even imagine how that feeling is going to be compounded in, like, now 5 weeks after the fact or 7 weeks after the fact, whatever Thanksgiving will be, at a family event. I don't know, Jason, I want to give you an opportunity to weigh in on how you're feeling about it. Because I have been having these conversations with Jewish friends of mine about, you know, friends that they haven't talked to for weeks and unclear if they're getting ignored or it's just life that's come up, and, you know, reading each other's social media posts to try to get a sense of where each other is, and, like, feeling each other out, and just not wanting to jeopardize, obviously, the love and friendships that they have, but trying to negotiate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to that end, I mean, our team publishes the Wired newsletter, which, you know, the subscriptions have gone off the chart. Like, on October 6th, we were sending to 43,000 people. And yesterday morning, we sent to 343,000 people. There are so many people who are looking to answer the exact questions. I mean, it's unbelievable. There's so many ways in which this moment is totally unprecedented. But the thing that we're sending 2 days before Thanksgiving is how to have hard conversations over the Thanksgiving dinner table, because you're going to have them and you need to be prepared. And it's not just to, you know, like, I think people forget, as soon as they get radicalized or politicized, they forget what it was like to not be radicalized or politicized. And they think just saying the thing they know is enough to be like, let me just bludgeon you with the truth. And then all of a sudden you will take it, and great. And then you'll be like me. And so it's, you know, a lot of things, like a lot of effective things, like listen, you know, like find the truth in what people are saying, how to talk, you know. So it's not just enough to be, like, full of righteousness and truth. You have to figure out how to meet people where they're at. That is, if they actually want to be moved. I mean, my family is very different than Liv's. I did not grow up in a radical family. I did not grow up in a, it's, what's bizarre is, I mean, we've had enough fights in the past, I guess, but since October 7th, not one family member has mentioned that anything is happening in the Middle East at all. To me, who I've been working around the clock for 7 weeks, whatever it's been, like waking up at 5 a.m, whatever, on this issue. No one is like, hey, work hard. Nothing, right? It's like completely avoided. And, you know, for me, I mean, people have different families, like, and they should figure out where to spend their efforts. Like, for me, I don't give a fuck what my family thinks about Palestine. What does it matter? If they, like, let's say I win the dinner table, what are they going to do? They're going to donate to the movement? They're going to start marching? Like, no, they're not, right? So it's like, I'd rather spend my energy, like, putting out the wire, like, helping people. There's also, like, you know, found family. A lot of people talk about that because it's so hard in America. There's lots and lots and lots of people who are actively looking for answers, who are trying to find ways to plug in. Personally, I'd much rather talk to them. That doesn't mean that other people shouldn't try to engage their families, but I think it's a personal choice about where you think your efforts can be spent. And the nice thing is that we used to put out versions of this in the past, but, like, in the middle of like last year or whatever, the conversation becomes so academic. It's just like people, retrenching their positions. Now there's real stakes to it. I think that there's the chance for a lot of people to be moved, like, Liv's father. There's a chance for a lot of people, they're seeing like that the Israeli military is just on a quest for blood. They're trying to gobble up land and try to, murder more people and, bomb hospitals. And there's an opening right now. I think there's been an opening since Netanyahu was elected last year. And the government went full blown right wing, and they have he had to make a coalition with these Jewish supremacists in order to hold the government. And we've been seeing an opening since then for because the claim of AIPAC, the claim of ADL, is that Israel speaks for all Jews. And then all of a sudden you have a bunch of Jews who were not radicals. They're not JVP anti-Semites or whatever it is that people say we are. These are people who were not thinking about this before are I'm very nervous, or we don't. We don't want right-wing Israeli politicians who are calling for genocide to come and do events for Israel bonds in Washington, D.C. So you see 1,000 people at a protest there. I would say 80 to 90% at least were people who had never been to a protest against anything remotely related to Israel. There's openings right now at the, I think at the dining room table, in the streets, with friends, on social media. There's all kinds of things. People should figure out, where they want to spend their time.
I'm curious. I mean, organizationally, I'm sure there's interesting internal conversations happening, because the call for a ceasefire, as much as the same folks who want to say that every lefty quote unquote slogan is a bad idea want to say that that's a bad slogan, it obviously isn't, because look at the polls. Look at how many people support it. I think of all of the asks that are sort of on the table right now, that is the one that is most accessible. You don't have to be anti-Zionist to want a ceasefire. You don't have to want there to be a single political change in Israel for there to be a ceasefire. You can fully support an ongoing occupation and want there to be a ceasefire. And so in many ways, politically and organizationally, it is a very effective big tent. I do wonder, though, what comes next. What comes next for JVP as an organization, if, as it seems, pressure seems to be mounting right now. I think the failure of the Al-Shifa raid exposed the lie, a lot of the lies that the IDF has been using as justification for a lot of the actions, a lot of the killing, a lot of the forced migration within Gaza. And I don't know how much longer that they're going to be able to rationalize the deaths, especially as the death toll continues to mount. So have you been thinking about what comes next? And, are there concerns about what that might do to the coalition that you've been able to so successfully build here?
I mean, I think something that's really striking is that there are groups that prior to this movement have positioned themselves as liberal Zionist groups, like J Street, for example, which is the progressive Jewish lobby. It's supposed to be this kind of opposite, more progressive voice to AIPAC. And they have been nowhere near calling for a ceasefire. So I think what this moment is exposing is the kind of inherent contradiction that is liberal Zionism. It would be one thing if there were groups that saying, we still need, we still even believe in occupation, but we need to stop the bombing. But those groups are nowhere to be found. All of the Zionist groups have really coalesced under an aggressively genocidal campaign. I mean, I think there's no other words for it. And so I think there's people who maybe are progressive Zionists that are just confused. They're I thought we were the people who are supposed to be saying, we need a strong state of Israel, but not like this. And they're feeling really lost, and they're finding home with us. And our hope is that in this movement, as we protest together, as we pray together, as we have hard conversations, that we can really move people and invite them into our movement. And, that's why in addition to our big protests, we're doing these how to have hard conversation workshops. We have an anti-Zionist Chavarah network. Chavarahs are little prayer groups. And those are formed all over the country as well. And so we're really trying to build community among ourselves so that people, feel the vibrancy that Judaism can be, even when it's not, and especially when it's not, oriented around Israel. And a lot of people to leave Zionism. I think some people are invested ideologically in the idea of Zionism, but some people feel like they're going to lose a lot. They're going to lose their synagogue. They're going to lose their friends. And so, it's our job to to show that there's, you might lose some relationships. You might not feel comfortable at your synagogue. I don't feel comfortable in most synagogues in America because of the way they peddle Israeli propaganda constantly. But we've begun to build this movement of the Judaism beyond Zionism, where you can now, pray in multiple cities in the country as an anti-Zionist Jew. You can, find deep relationships. And so I think, the ceasefire for us is just the beginning. We know that after the ceasefire, we need diplomatic negotiation. And after that, we need an end to the occupation. And we are, the only thing we can do is just really have those conversations in a moment. We are unapologetic about being an anti-Zionist organization, but we are welcoming to people right now who are committed to doing the work for ceasefire, no matter where they might be.
And I think it's worth...
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Look, it's worth saying that like Israel is able to do what it does because of the political and the financial support that the United States provides it, right? We are in the belly of the beast. I think most people are aware of that. And so it's like the task that you're talking about, Brie, is huge. Like, how do we force the largest, most powerful military in the history of the world to divest from something that is incredibly useful to it, to its power, right? It's an enormous task. So there's lots of steps along the way. I mean, it's a huge task. But I think one of the things that is true, yes, I think this coalition will at some point have to really grapple with the questions that are put for it about next. But what we've been seeing right now is a new anti-war movement. It's the largest anti-war movement. It's the most significant anti-war actions that have happened in a very long time. When you think about the anti-war movement of the early 2000s, the Iraq War, which I was part of, as soon as Obama got elected, they went to sleep. The Democrats are here, that's fine. And the bombings kept going, the occupation kept going. When the Democrats get elected, the anti-war movement tends to go to sleep. So these are the most significant anti-war actions since Johnson in the late 60s with Vietnam. It's unbelievable what we're seeing. This is generational. It's huge. We have so many people. And I think, yes, we will grapple with questions, and some people we will lose. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to try to, but we're going to try to figure out how to keep those coalitions together on a principled basis. We're going to lose some, but we're going to emerge from this on the other side with vastly more people than we had before. Like I was at a JVP meeting in Denver last night. A month and a half ago, there were 4 people in the Denver chapter. There were 4 people, which is hard. It was like people had moved and whatever. Last night, there was 40 people and 40 people remotely, and there was a bunch of people who couldn't make it. We're talking about 20-fold increases in a very short amount of time. And people who are like, how do I get plugged in? How do I work on this? And so if you said at the outset, we were able to have an outsized impact because we were organized and we had, we were embedded in different locations. Well, what happens when we are 2, 4, 10 times bigger than we were before in more locations, able to do more things? We've now been working with other organizations. We have better relationships. So it's a long haul, and we want to, keep, increasing our demands until we ultimately force the United States to divest from Israel and stop, and end apartheid. Our mandate is ultimately to the Palestinian organization on the ground. Then we are working with them to figure out what the next steps are. And so ceasefire may not have seemed the most radical in the first days, but it's what the people on the ground were asking for. They're like, we know what's going to happen. We are going to get slaughtered. Our buildings are going to get crushed. We are going to get, dispossessed. Our children will be killed. Please stop the bloodshed. We'll worry about the other stuff later, but please stop the bloodshed. And so it's like both the morally right thing to do. It turned out the strategically right thing to do, but we need to take things like one at a time. It's impossible to crystal ball it out to know what's going to happen in the future. And so we just have to sort of take things where they are and move from there. But whatever that is, we'll be moving for a much, much bigger place of strength, visibility, of capacity.
Yeah, I know I told you I don't want to obviously imperil the amazing organizing you've been able to do by asking you specific questions about how you've managed to do it. But I do wonder if I phrase it this way, would you have any advice from what you've learned from your ability to get all those people to shut down Grand Central Station or to seemingly... I remember I was talking to Katie Halper about it, and she was like, "Oh, I'm outside. I can't get in because I didn't see my text until an hour late, and I showed up late." And I'm like, "Wait, what? How is this? How's everybody getting mobilized? How does Katie Halper know how to leave her hot yoga session or whatever and scramble downtown at a moment's notice?" It is it's amazing, and I'm like, I want to know in part because it's like we've been dying for elected progressives, where it's AOC or whomever, who have this enormous reach to be doing stuff like this over any number of events over the last few years. And they seem not to be either able to or have the desire to. And we're just trying to figure out which is it, because you guys have obviously pulled it off to amazing effect again and again and again.
Well, Liv, you want?
I mean, I think we're all a little shocked. I think partly partly we have incredible hardworking organizers who feel like this is their life mission, or one of their missions. They are called, I think a lot of us feel called really deeply to this movement. I think, especially as Jews being raised with this idea of like never again, never again. I feel like it's like, this is the moment. Like, this is the moment where a genocide is underway, and we know what happened when people don't, when people don't speak up. It's what happened to our families. I think something we talk about a lot in JVP is the Holocaust was this tragedy, and then it was magnified because the world just stood by as it happened. People did not let in Jewish refugees. People did not intervene. And so this idea that like you can't be a bystander when a genocide is underway. And so I think partly this is like drilled so deep into our consciousness as Jews, as descendants of people who have survived these things. So there's this deep, motivation where we're doing it with our community. We're showing up with each other. We have great organizing capacity. I feel like Jason can talk to the digital component, but I think it is partly the deep investment we have in this moment, and because it is for Palestinian liberation, but it is also for our own liberation as well. I think that Zionism has really, narrowed the vast beauty and diversity and dynamicness of the Jewish tradition. There were Jews all over the world speaking different languages, like political diversity. And I think Zionism has said Judaism can be only one thing, and it is this thing. And so I think we are fighting also for this like more capacious Judaism. We're fighting for a leftist Judaism, which is a huge part of the Jewish tradition that's been really erased in the last couple of decades. We're fighting for the radical possibility of diaspora, and that too is extremely motivating, in addition to our absolute refusal to be bystanders when a genocide is waged in our names.
Yeah. And I think
isn't the argument for why Hasidic Jews are so prevalent at the pro-Palestine marches and anti-Zionist? Isn't there some scriptural reason about their argument that the Torah says that Judaism is supposed to be rooted in a diaspora, that we're a diasporic people? I don't mean to put
totally. We can. No, I love a good
theologian here.
I love a good scriptural question. I would say the Hasidic community is very divided. There's one sect of Hasids who often show up at rallies, and they believe in a kind of scriptural interpretation that says that we are like a fundamentally diasporic people, and that being like in exile is part of the Jewish condition. There's like tremendous scriptural disagreement, Jewish theory disagreement. I'm super interested in all that, and yeah, I am from my own both theoretical and religious perspective, moved by the possibility of diaspora. I think that it is it's a challenge. I don't think it's easy to be a diasporic person. I think it is vulnerable, but I think it's also a resistance to this idea that ethno-based militarized nation states are the answer for this world, and I'm not sure that they are. I can't speak to all the other people's, but I can speak for my own, which is that I think that this idea of being deeply rooted in who you are and your tradition and your identity, but also deeply rooted in where you are, which means showing up with respect to the land you're on, showing up in solidarity to the people you're in community with, who are Jews and non-Jews. That is the kind of human work that I am really motivated by, that I feel called to, and I feel like the Jewish tradition, asks of us. And I would say some Hasids would agree, and some Hasids would think I'm full of shit. So,
right.
Yeah, I gotta say, as a Black American, it resonates with me for what it's worth. The idea of being kind of inherently diasporic, and the question of whether or not, as someone who feels vulnerable and a minority in a predominantly white country and all of those things, I have a lot of empathy for the idea of wanting a homeland, but also at the counterfactual of that not really being on offer and having long ago resolved to this being it, and having to work toward it being a more perfect union, or whatever Obamaism you want to deploy in this moment, and also feeling deeply American as a consequence of not having an alternative, not even knowing, obviously, where my ancestors came from. So I find that particular question and that idea to be really interesting. And I can see how it could be seen very negatively, to be always on the run and to never have a home. But I also see a lot of possibility in it as well. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jason. Go ahead.
No. Thank you. I think that also at a political level, like, just to answer your question about, how have we been able to pull this off? I mean, I think there's a tendency on the left to fall into one of two camps. It's either like, we're going to embrace the politics, the most radical thing we can say, right? We're going to think that like the deed is going to convince the many to come into action. We're going to do something radical, and then people will wake up and they will come out, get off their couches, and they will start doing the radical things that we're doing. Then there's the counterpoint to that is like, well, we want to just be the most respectable left we can. And so they absorb into the Democratic Party. There's two tendencies of like, we're like the tendency of the possible and of the, we want to make impossible happen. And neither of those are great strategies. You want to walk a middle line between those two things. It's like, how do you do that? Like, I think, JVP has made a lot of mistakes, and, for sure, I don't want to mean to say that we're corrective to the entire left, but like the protests that we've built, our mandate, Palestinians have said, please become a movement of many, many Jews so that you can help. Every time we are accused of anti-Semitism, we can actually just expose people to the oppression and the killing and the apartheid and the dispossession. So like the ceasefire now it wasn't just this magic idea that one person had and it caught on. It's like designed to, how do we bring as many people in? We need many, many people. And we got a lot of things wrong. We listened to our Palestinian partners. We made statements. We were trying to do the right thing. And we heard from other Jewish, like reliable anti-Zionist Jews, that some of the things we were saying weren't going enough to talk about like Israeli civilian death, for instance, that there was causing them pain, that it appeared that we were taking, a side as opposed to the side of human life. And we listened to that. I think it's about being able to absorb like criticism, to have a left that can actually talk to one another and respond to that. We can have inputs. We're hearing from all chapters all over the country how things are working, and we're making adjustments. I think a lot of times people are just like sort of like, there's this phrase like, fall in love with the problem, not the solution, right? And people are falling in love with the solution. They're like, my idea is the best, regardless of what problem we're trying to solve and how we apply it. And I think there's many, many times we failed. There's many times we've hold protests and very few people show up, or it hasn't made much of an impact. But in this case, it feels like, what people want has been clear to us and to many other organizations. We respond to that, and then people come into that. There's a dialogic, relationship that we can have with people that allows us to know where people are at and how to be like, how do we move just a little bit? How do we get you into action on this? Not like, how do we do the most radical thing and hope it shocks you out of your, out of your complacency? I don't think the American public is complacent. I just think they're like being beaten down into like a sense of learned helplessness,
Yeah.
And then the last,
yeah, please.
The last thing I'll say, like this, not to undermine our work, but there is a lot of truth that like coming from our mouths, the mainstream media is more willing to receive it. And that it has to do deeply with Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism and the immense and rampant and pernicious hatred of Palestinian people and Palestinian voices in this country. And so I want to like uplift our movement. I want to uplift our organizing. I think we're really throwing down right now in a beautiful way. And like the truth is, we're saying shit that Palestinians have been saying for a long time, and the mainstream media has been unwilling to hear it, discounts it as anti-Semitic, and that is the context in which our voice is being heard right now. And so I feel like we can't talk about our success without talking about that piece as well.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's true and important. I mean, it's a little bit what I was getting at earlier when I said I feel like I have a responsibility because I know it won't be heard from other people. I remember when I wrote that first article for Current Affairs, this writer whose name I'm blocking had written a very similar piece for The Week around the exact same time. And I remember him getting thrashed on Twitter as just another white racist Bernie bro. And then I say it, and people said the same thing about me, mind you. There was like this weird write-up in the Daily Kos that was like, oh, another, maybe she'd have some good points if she weren't white. It was like,
oh my
sir,
God.
I am Googleable. So you still get it, but like they get a bunch of pushback because they have to come up with a new argument when they can't so easily write you away for whatever their identity biased reasons are for writing you off. So that is why I think what you're doing is so important and why I appreciate you so much. And I really wanted to have you on to talk today. Please do come back to the show. I'm sure more is going to happen. You're going to have more successes and more protest actions. And this issue certainly isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So let people know where they can find you, where they can reach out to JVP, where they can join up, get on your mailing list, and also find you on social media.
So yeah, thanks for having us on. It's such an important program. It's really a delight to be here. If people want to reach us, we're at jvp.org. jvp.org/ceasefire is where like 300,000 people have signed on to a petition demanding that Biden, demanding that Biden demand a ceasefire. There's plenty of actions people can take there. There's plenty of news items there that people can get acquainted with what's going on. That's a great first stop to sort of get acquainted with what we do, with the range of things that are going on, with all the media hits that Liv has garnered. It's been amazing, and we've been trying to put it all on the web. So people should visit us at jvp.org.
And you can follow us on Instagram as well, Jewish Voice for Peace. And I want to put a plug in for our power hours. Every weekday, we do a power hour or power half hour where people gather in virtual community, call the representatives, oftentimes write letters to the editor, to major newspapers. There's sometimes spiritual leaders that come on as well. So especially if you're not in a major city and you can't join these mass protests, there's virtual community being built. And yeah, the movement, we need more people. We want to welcome people and feel privileged to be working hard in this moment, and also glad to
I love that, Liv. Honestly, I love the idea of the movement also being rooted in some spirituality. I got to say, as someone who was raised very secular, always admired Judaism for its willingness to allow people to ask questions, because I was that little kid, who never could have tolerated a more restrictive religious environment. And when you say that you're more able to question God than question Israel, that really, it stings, because it does go against some of the things that I love most about Judaism as a religion. So I love that you have a faith-based approach as well. So thank you again for being here. And to all the listeners, take care of yourselves and continue to keep the faith. Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.